Hi, everyone. I'm Nomiki Konst, and you are watching and listening to The Nomiki Show. If you're not already subscribing to our channel, and if you don't want to learn about how the DNC works and the establishment works and all the tricks that they throw at us, then why are you on this channel? So go down and subscribe at YouTube. And of course, we'd love for you to become a patron on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show, because that's how our content is going to get better. It's going to become fancier. I'm going to be able to edit these interviews that we do when I'm outside of the studio, and maybe even have a studio in my own apartment at some point. Also, real quick plug, if you haven't already gotten your tickets, we're doing a live show in Los Angeles, with a bunch of all-star pundits and activists. It's for Super Tuesday. So it's a party, and we are covering Super Tuesday, and it's going to be streamed on multiple platforms as well. Kind of mind-blowing. The link is going to be in the description wherever you're listening to this or watching this. So it's Friday afternoon as of right now, and we are anticipating a crazy caucus in Nevada, not unlike what happened in 2016. If you were following last week's events with the Culinary Union putting out that the Bernie Sanders supporters are nasty. I mean, it just goes with a lot of the smears that we've heard over the last several years that are being reiterated by all of the presidential candidates except for Bernie Sanders at this point, and maybe even Amy Klobuchar. I'll give her that one. But I was on Twitter, and you may have seen this thread from Dan Rolle. He is a former congressional candidate, an activist. He's an author. He has a book coming out on his run for Congress. And he is a Nevada resident who knows all too well what this caucus situation is like. And his Twitter thread was so informative, because I think for a lot of us who haven't been on the ground in Nevada and weren't there in 2016, we're looking for what they might do. Harry Reid's machine is notorious. He still operates in that state, even though he's not the Senate majority leader or minority leader anymore, or in the Senate. He still has a strong effect on the politics of the land. So, Dan, thank you so much for joining us on this.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to say I will be off on Super Tuesday. I'm absolutely excited. I'm going to be tuning in to your live show. I think it's super exciting. And if you're watching this and you don't tune into that show, you're going to be missing out, I promise you. Thank you for talking about my book. I actually did write a book about running for office in 2016. It was absolutely eye-opening. It was shocking in many ways to understand. You talked about the consultant class, the establishment. Shocking how hard it is as an average citizen to get involved, to play a part in the system. And it was eye-opening, but it was also incredibly inspiring. And I met human beings who told me stories that really, everyone has a story that will really can take you to your knees, to be honest with you. And so that was so inspiring that, yeah, I actually lost big time, but it was great. And I think if you have like this feeling in the back of your head, like I want to get involved, I want to make a difference, you should. And I wrote a book called Citizen Candidate. And for anyone who follows your show, if you want to hit me up on Twitter, send me a direct message as a gift for tuning into your show. I will send them a free copy of that book, no charge at all.
Nice.
Yeah.
What a kind socialist you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so excited. Thank you for talking about the excitement generated around the Nevada caucus. I too was surprised to see the flyer from Culinary that generated all of this conversation. And I think the main reason I was surprised was that I think anyone who's followed Bernie for any amount of time, whether that's a day, a week, a year, or 40 years, you've got to know that this is probably the most active and powerful supporter of organized labor that I can name, and look no further than his own presidential campaign when he became groundbreaking, broke history by unionizing his campaign staff and then putting the power back to the people. But I also have my own experience with Culinary, and I think it's important to make the distinction between the 60,000 culinary workers in Las Vegas, in Nevada, and the people who sometimes make decisions on their behalf. And I think what's really, really interesting and a very hot narrative in the Democratic Party right now, when we talk about Donald Trump, is everyone asks, why does no one stand up? Why does no one question? Why does no one oppose anything that Donald Trump does in the Republican Party? And I have to tell you, it concerns me that, when someone like the leadership at Culinary makes a decision about a presidential nomination, and the instinct is to shut that down and to not create an open space for communication and conversation. And that was what really worried me about the dialogue around Sanders and his support for unions, because not only was it, I believe, not true based on his record, but also I think it's dangerous. I think it's dangerous to just cast someone in that way and not allow open discussion and conversation. One of the things that has resulted from that thread really blowing up is a lot of people who are in organized labor have reached out to me and have said, hey, actually, we are choosing to support Bernie Sanders because we believe he's going to make organized labor stronger. And I think the other thing that, any one of us who support Sanders, I think we all recognize that if you're in organized labor and you want to support a candidate and you make that choice and you're informed by the information that your leadership gives you, that's great. And we appreciate whatever decision it is that you make. We just ask that the facts be made transparent and that everybody have the same sort of information. I think what really concerns me about the whole narrative, and the reason I decided to speak out, was I too experienced in my own congressional run having that narrative shaped at a time that I think was damaging. At the time of my congressional run, Culinary made the decision to endorse Harry Reid's candidate, Ruben Kihuen, and had done so similarly with a flyer. And that was before most of us had even signed up to register to run. And I thought that decision was ill-informed at the time. And I didn't really understand the power that Culinary has in the state of Nevada. Obviously deservedly so. Union and organized labor is very, very important. But the particular tactics that I saw in that instance in 2016, and then what I saw here, I think it's worth calling out. It's worth asking the question.
So let's talk a little bit about the specific tactics, because I think going into the caucus tomorrow, Saturday, people want to be aware of what kind of shenanigans might happen on the ground. And you were very poignant in how you explained, detailed what kind of things happen. So can you just give like a little summary of what happened in 2016 and what we might expect?
Sure. And I think some of the things we do anticipate seeing again. One of the things that happened, actually going all the way back to 2008, when Hillary Clinton and Obama campaigned in Nevada for the same very important, first in the West Caucus. Actually, what happened was Obama had outmaneuvered Clinton in the caucus in 2008 with really great ground organizing. And Robbie Mook in 2016 learned that lesson, and they weren't going to make that mistake again. And one of the things that also happened is you have, it's such a mirror of what's happening right now. And that's why I really want people to pay attention. 2016, you have Clinton very closely winning in Iowa. I mean, almost identical to what we're seeing right now. Then you've got Sanders in New Hampshire heading out, taking a clear victory in New Hampshire. And then all of the conversation, which is what's happening right now, is that, Sanders has got this momentum. He's got the wind at his back. And in 2016, Hillary Clinton knew that. Robbie Mook knew that. And there were many times that, as is now happening to, for example, Joe Biden, where the donors, the consultant class, and the people who write the checks were starting to say, if Clinton doesn't win Nevada, we're going to start pulling the funding. We're not going to be able to fund a losing campaign. And that's what happened. So Senator Reid at the time made some phone calls, and he cleared the way for everyone in Culinary to head to caucus on caucus day by having the time off. And as Clinton had learned in 2008, they leaned heavily on what are called at-large caucus sites, which are caucus sites on the Las Vegas Strip, in the casino sites. And what happened in 2016 ranges from, hey, we've got it documented well, to sort of fringe, like stories you often hear about. Right. But I think the overwhelming sentiment of what happened in 2016 was that, it absolutely blunted Sanders' momentum at a time when essentially it is still my opinion, losing Nevada really, really stalled the race for Sanders exactly as Mook had intended it would. And it was a very effective way to do that. And I think some of the things I'm excited. We
remember the chair throwing incident. I mean, I think that one was what got a lot of coverage. The most coverage
Sure.
was the quote unquote supposed alleged chair throwing incident when,
Sure.
you know, in New York, for instance, right around the same time, we were trying to choose our delegates, and there actually was somebody who was attacked
Yeah.
by Hillary supporters. So there was a lot of mythology being spread at that time.
Yeah.
But what actually did, like, you know, we heard about people being closed out of sites. Can you just lay out some of the details? Like, people want to know specifics about what they do.
Sure. So, I mean, if you, what I would encourage anyone watching to do is just look up 2016 caucus on YouTube or Twitter, and you and see for yourself, make the determinations. I think some of the common things that we saw were this disproportionate weight towards the at-large sites, which I think a lot of people would argue isn't necessarily fair representatively to the larger Las Vegas population. You know, actually the majority of whom don't work on the Las Vegas Strip. Some of the other things that happen that I think people want to be aware of is just sort of the chaos of the caucus moment causing in question as to whether or not we should, could, and ultimately can trust the results that came out of 2016. You know, you can go back and see videos of caucus sites getting sort of mobbed by people as they go in, and then they all just sort of rush out in sort of chaos, and then there's people just standing around with forms just like this. And I have to tell you, I do think we're going to see some of that on Saturday. But I'd love to, you know, educate everyone on some just tips about what caucus means in Nevada. And I think it's relevant because, you know, it's not exclusive to the caucus in Nevada here. We have a long road ahead of us to a nomination. And I think people need to be reminded to stay tuned in and stay connected. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's. What kind of tips should people going into caucus, or anybody who's working in Nevada right now, who's you know, making phone calls or getting questions on the line, like about caucusing on the day of? Let's inform our listeners.
Yeah. So. You know, one of the things I want to talk about, this is the first year ever that Nevada decided to do early voting in the caucus. So we're going to bring in all of those almost 75,000 early votes into the caucus. For some context, in 2016, 84,000 people total caucused. So we're expecting just a ton of those early votes to come in. One of the things some activists on the ground are concerned about is the Nevada Democratic Party ready? Have they counted all of the votes? Will they be able to bring them in? So there is a very realistic scenario, excuse me, where we may see a caucus on Saturday where sites don't have the votes from earlier in the week. That's sort of your worst case scenario. But let's assume, because I am seeing lots of good things on the ground, the Sanders campaign is the most organized, efficient, and strategic campaign ever. They've got a better ground game. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Getting all worked. I've been on those phones, so my throat is a little bit sore right now. So, you know, one of the things that I think is important for anyone caucusing on Saturday to know is that room and that moment is going to be sort of a mini convention. And you are in charge of a participant of that mini convention. And you have all the rights that you might have at a normal convention. And so one of the things I would encourage you to consider, if you've gone through the process, you know, don't be afraid to run for the site chair of your local caucus site. If you're comfortable with the rules, the Nevada Democratic Party will have a volunteer that's running that site. They will ask sort of non-discreetly if you'd like to elect them to be the permanent chair of the site. And what I would tell you is, if you think you've got a good feel of the room and you think you can run it, and honestly, if you can read a PDF and you think you can do it, I encourage you to run, to nominate yourself, and then to have a vote. This is, after all, a democratic process. And I think regardless of whether you do or do that or not, remember that a room is 30, 40, 50, 60 of your neighbors. And it's important to remain civil at all time, to be diplomatic, to not get angry. You know, you're going to see people who are voting for another person. You may not agree or align with the reason that they're doing that, but you can do a lot by being really polite in the moment, by talking to your neighbors. And, you know, as we saw in Iowa, you're going to have different rounds of voting, what are called alignments. So you'll have an opportunity to meet some of your neighbors and probably convince them, if their candidate is not viable on the first round, to come on over to your side. It will happen. And that's why being really on top of it in the moment, being polite to your neighbors, is so important. So that's my number one recommendation. My number two recommendation is you're cleared to take any photos, video. I'm so sorry. Take any photos or video, to take any footage that you want to. It is a misnomer that you are not allowed to photograph the caucus site. There are laws in Nevada and other states that prohibit the filming and or capturing photos of a ballot or of voting.
Right.
And a lot of the time, people will throw that out in the caucus to scare people, especially if something bad is happening.
Right.
They will say, hey, here's the law, you're committing a felony or something like that. And I just want everyone to know that is not true. The caucus is a private event. You are absolutely, in fact, the Nevada Democratic Party has said in their rules guide, you're allowed to film, you're allowed to take footage, you're allowed to tweet, put on YouTube, Facebook, whatever you want to do. So regardless, I mean, honestly, if it's going great, you should video or take pictures.
Mm-hmm.
You want to share that. You want to get people excited. But in particular, if something's not right, just document. Document. And most importantly, don't necessarily feel the need to always add commentary when you're collecting evidence in a caucus. That can skew the narrative in a way that's not helpful. But if you see something that's not right, objectively document it and start letting people know.
Do you feel that this time around, the party, because parties, just to reiterate, parties control caucuses, not the states, unlike primaries, which are controlled by the state legislatures. Do you feel that the party is prepared for tomorrow, has learned its lessons from 2016?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think that's where I struggle because I want to celebrate what I see as record-breaking turnout in Nevada. I want to celebrate the thousands of excited Bernie Sanders supporters that I have seen poured in. People from all over the country, all over the world really, have come into Nevada to celebrate this caucus because it looks very, very promising. And I want to recognize that. And I want it to be really exciting because it is really exciting. But I also have to be realistic in what I'm seeing on the ground. And what I'm seeing on the ground is a party that did not learn the lessons from 2016. I posted, and you're welcome to check out on Twitter or Periscope, posted a video of the actual entire early voting process. And what you'll see in that video is you'll see hundreds of people waiting hours and hours and hours to caucus early. You'll see actually, and sometimes you can't make this stuff up, what you'll see is some volunteers, actually some people who were standing in line at one of the caucus sites got so tired of standing in line that they actually ended up becoming instant volunteers to actually check people in at a caucus site. And that to me was a huge moment of sort of being concerned. I think also when you look at what is, I think, an emerging scandal out of the caucus, you have a situation where at least 1,000 ballots, seemingly predominantly affecting minority groups, have been tossed out. One point, it's about 1,000 ballots have been tossed for not having a signature, which is, a little bit over 1%, 1.5%. And that's actually a huge number. You think 1%, but in an election, 1% is pretty significant.
Is it concentrated? Does it seem to be concentrated to a certain area?
I haven't had a chance to dig into that data. But I've definitely heard, I've seen, I've heard what everyone else has heard. I think regardless of where it's concentrated, again, when we talk about lessons learned, we've known about this for 4 years. And the idea that you would have someone wait in line for 4 hours, go through the caucus process. I will point out that one of the advisements and procedures for the early vote process was actually to have someone take a look at the ballot before you actually put it in the box. And so the question that arises there is, well, how do we lose any ballots for signature if part of the Democrats' process in Nevada was to have someone check that? And I can tell you, I saw that happening. I saw when I early voted, someone took a look at my ballot to validate that, hey, everything's filled out correctly. Here's what it is. Put it in the box. So I have real questions about why it is that over 1,000 ballots were now invalidated prior to the caucus for not having a signature. I think what's also interesting about that in terms of learning lessons is, as you stated, a caucus is a private event and the Nevada Democratic Party can exercise their discretion as to how they want to do anything. Absolutely. And so, I think what hurts as a democratic socialist is the idea that someone has looked at a ballot for someone who stood in line probably for 3 to 5 hours, looked at the ballot, saw everything they needed to see, something that's been, verified multiple times. You've shown your ID, we validated their voter file, we validated their voter PIN, and someone made the decision in this party in Nevada to say, no, we're going to toss that ballot. That hurts a lot, and I'm not sure they've had a great explanation of that.
Ultimately, I mean, this is something that has become a recurring theme of this cycle, last cycle, but also the show. It really comes down to a couple of decisions. It's a person, it's a human making a split-second decision, and that's what gets us into these situations. So Dan, we only have about a minute and a half left. Do you want to give people just like some hope for tomorrow? Any thoughts, concerns? Let's put it out there because we were hours away from the caucus.
We are. If you're in Las Vegas, I encourage you to head out to the Sanders event at Springs Preserve tonight and meet your friends and family. Bring everyone you can. Show your support. I am optimistic. We will have a record-breaking turnout. Please hit me up on Twitter on Caucus Day. If something isn't right and you need help and you need someone who's grounded in the rules and knows, hey, a ferret came into the caucus room. What do we do right now? Like, I'm happy to answer that question for you. And I'll be happy to be objective in doing so. But I would also just take a moment. First of all, thank you for having me on. I will absolutely be watching your live show on Super Tuesday. And if you're watching this now and you don't, you're missing out. I would also just say it looks increasingly likely that the next president of the United States is going to be Bernard Sanders, and that is so exciting for me. And what I've learned in life is there's never an easy road to anywhere worth going, and I think that's ahead of us. I think we've got about 6 more months of this ahead of us, and it's going to be frustrating at times. It's going to be like pull your hair out moments, probably more often than not. But keep focused on the end. Keep focused on that vision, and know that we're taking on some powerful interests. And the more friction you see is probably a sign that we're actually a lot closer than we've ever been.
That's great. That's great advice. They're going to push back because they're scared of us. And one final question I have on Harry Reid: just how powerful is he?
He's only as powerful as we show him in this caucus. That's what I would say. A Bernie Sanders win in Nevada would be a significant sort of kink in that armor. But the reality is, as of right now, as of 3:00 on Friday in Nevada, he's very powerful. And a phone call from Harry Reid is going to make a lot of things happen really, really quickly. That's why a phone call from you as a Bernie Sanders supporter to another potential voter matters more than it ever has. I'll be on the ground watching. We'll be doing the right thing, the right time, and the right moment. And again, thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Dan. And if I can just say one thing, at this moment when we're all being pitted against each other, or all the candidates are pitted against us, remember that it is those second choices. I mean, Bernie needs to be the second choice of many candidates. And the polling that came out today showed just that Bernie's the second choice for Biden, for Buttigieg, which is a surprise to me, and for Warren. So we don't want to go up against them. They're trying to paint the narrative that we're bros because they don't want their second choice to go to Bernie. And I don't know what Harry Reid's agenda is. I do know that he was a colleague of Bernie Sanders and is friends with him, but we all have our ideological differences in our backing at home. So Dan, I greatly appreciate your support. Hopefully things go smoothly tomorrow and Bernie comes in with a huge win, and we won't have to have you back on to explain it all. But I would love to have you back on regardless. So thank you for taking the time. And then have fun tonight at the rally.
Thank you.